Hey everyone, welcome to Birth Podcast. I'm Ash. I want to take you into a conversation I had with my friend Fela. He grew up in the UK, he's Nigerian, he's a yogi, he's a photographer. And our conversation here begins when he is in boarding school and he found an Afrocentric culture within the school that gave him confidence in who he is in his own body. He would later go on to train in photography and in yoga, and he has been an instructor all over the world, impacting other communities. Yoga has also provided a sense of healing and confidence within his own world, exposed him to things beyond what we can see. So listen in.
I didn't really have a conversation with my parents, and I think those questions started to come when I actually left home and I was in boarding school, and then also in boarding school there were a whole load of Africans there who were very like Afrocentric. They were really proud about being Africans, and so it was really nice to be in that environment with other Africans and West Indian kids. Yeah, so it was really it was very nice to experience that and grow up through that, and then know that there was more to being an African, than what the media and school and educational system was try to put on you.
I like that. It's almost as if your primary years begin with sort of this challenge of trying to understand self and being a kid with all of these things going on, right? Because the system is not created to actually support you, to support your race, to support even really anything other than sort of a blanketed education. And then you go to a boarding school where you feel a little more welcomed, and not only that, but your ethnicity gets to be pronounced. It gets to have sort of permission to be visible, which kind of helps shift some of your identity a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about that, just as far as you look back now and you get to look at that space and you understand more in terms of things like healing and identity as a man, as a black man, as a human, as a spiritual being. Just that sort of transition and identity. How do you see that, now?
Mm. So I think earlier on, like racism was around. You would often get white guys in cars screaming out their windows like nigger this, black this, or go home, or that typical racism stuff. And for me, I kind of inside me, it was like I'm actually happy with who I am. I'm like, yeah, I have no prejudice against anyone else. I'm quite happy with who I am. And then there was something inside me that just said, these people who are prejudiced and racist, they're the ones who have the problem. So I kind of turned it around and I was like, you know, this conversation about racism, I don't really need to sit down and speak to a room full of racists. It's actually, they need to speak to each other and kind of work out what their problems are. Because I don't have a problem. I'm happy with who I am. I'm not causing harm to anyone else. You guys have the problem. So you need to go to therapy or see a psychologist and work out what your problem is. And so that was my kind of attitude for maybe from the age of 11 or 12. I kind of like switched that.
Do you think that that's because at the age of 11 you actually walked into a classroom or walked into a boarding school and you had the support of all of these other people who were a little bit like you?
I do think so, because a lot of these guys who were at school, they were like top rugby players. They were really, some of them were really very, very intelligent guys, and they were all African, It was like, so there was this huge core of like, black older boys who you could look up to, you know. And I think that made a real big difference. And I'm sure if I went to school in a London educational system, it would have been completely different. Yeah, but I feel like going to this boarding school, um, where kids who parents were diplomats or uh, their parents traveled a lot, they sent them to the school. So there were a lot of diversity, like kids who were from I don't know from different areas of Africa as well, and politicians' kids and kids who were like from families who were like in poverty and they were sent. So there's a really nice mixture of that going on, and I do think that that kind of did imprint something in me to kind of like that to be proud of who I am. Yeah, and I think that that experience did imprint that on me. Mm. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was like it was in the countryside, there were trees, and I found that this real love for nature. Being there, I love to go walking in the woods and walk by the sea and by the river. There was a river Orwell because it was in Suffolk, the school. Um, so yeah, it was really. I was so glad for that experience of not being grown up, not growing up in the concrete jungle. It was nice to have to experience nature, to walk in the woods, to have trees, to have this space around you. Um, yeah, and so I'm so glad that I actually didn't go to school in the city. You know, and it's funny now as an adult, I crave for nature. So
I
I
love
always
that. I love that.
crave.
I have a similar,
Mm,
we went to Colorado when I was about 11 years old, and we
mm,
went from a small town in Ohio to Colorado, and nature just exploded for me.
mm,
And now I need it. I can't live without it. And it
yeah,
gave me something that it took me back to the mother, right? Like the original mother.
yeah.
What other sports did you play when you were at school?
Uh, we did rugby. We played cricket, basketball. Yeah, because I studied PE, so we did basketball. Um, I did I think scuba diving, but we in the winter seasons we did a thing called octopus, which was like this underwater hockey type thing. Yeah, it's octopus. I think it's in the Olympics now. So, what other sports did we do? What did I
So
do?
how do you get to, because this is all body movement. So let's go to this direction. How do you eventually get to
Mm,
yoga?
so how do I get to yoga? That's quite interesting. So when I left school at 16, and from 16, I it's funny because there was a guy from school, from the boarding school, who lived in this area in Hackney. So when I left school, I kind of bumped into him, and I knew he was like from school. He was a few years older than me. He was like a promoter of clubs and stuff. So and and he was like kind of like my how can I say like my mentor for London, like to introduce me into the London scene. So he would promote clubs, and then whenever he was going, so we bumped into once, and then he would like come around and say, "Oh, I'm going to promote this club. Come with me." And I would go out with him and go to different clubs, and we'll be giving out flyers. And so that happened for a while, and then he asked me to DJ because I had all these records, and he had records, and I was like, "Okay, I'm 16, and I was DJing in clubs in the West End of London, which was quite nice at that age. And so from there, um, while I was DJing, I decided that I needed to make a career choice. Like I DJed for like 4 years, and then I was like came to a point where I was like, I need to make a decision. Like, do I want to continue as a DJ, or do I want to do something else? And I always had this passion for photography because at boarding school there was a photography club, and I was part of the photography club, and I loved that. So then I decided that actually I want to go to college or university to study photography. So I did that, and then at photography at the university, I met this guy who lived again. He lived in the same neighborhood, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go to a yoga class," and I had no idea what yoga was. And then from 16 to 20, I think I was playing rugby for a couple of years in a London club, and then I stopped. I wasn't really doing anything with my body. So one Monday after after college, I went to this class, and it was set in this kind of this old hall somewhere. There was an Indian teacher teaching, and he was teaching Iyengar yoga. I did the class, and I just felt amazing. And what I found really odd, which my mind was telling me, was like we're doing these like forward bends, and I was like, oh my god, I'm maybe 20 years old, and I can't touch the floor when I do a forward bend, like without pain. I had all this pain in my hamstrings and my back, and I was just like, no human being should, at that age, should be able to do a forward bend and feel pain in their body. It's like that's not right. And then at the end, we did shavasana, and it was an amazing feeling, like of just this amazing sense of relaxation, and then this rush of creativity. There's images and stuff going on. It was just like just felt so good. And then after class, the whole week I had this energy for the whole week. It was like this electricity or this energy for life was fantastic. But I didn't realize it was from the yoga until I missed classes a few times. And then somehow I realized it was the yoga. When I went to yoga, the week would go smoothly, everything would be fantastic. When I missed it, there was this spark, this energy wasn't there. And then I realized that this practice is more powerful than what it is. It's not just a physical practice, but it's doing all these other stuff which I didn't know at the time. And then I started to go around the secondhand shops, secondhand bookshops, and buying books and started reading a little bit more about this practice and you know the diet, the yoga diet, the practice, what it does, what this posture does to you. That was my kind of introduction to yoga, and I just continued every Monday for 3 years. I would go. I had no intention of like becoming a teacher. That was the last thing on my mind. So finished my degree. I got a job as a fine art black and white printer in a lab. And then what I used to do then, I would go to classes, like I tried to go to classes after work. And then what happened was that then I was at this job for maybe 2 years working in the lab. And then I decided to go freelance. So I became like a freelance printer, and then I became a freelance photographer. And then I had more time to explore yoga. So I started to do I think I was at one point I was doing a class every evening. Like I was going every evening to class, all the classes in the neighborhood. I would like just see who was teaching, and then go to the classes and decide which classes I liked. One night I went out and I met this group of people, and it's kind of the first time I met yogis. And they had classes in the morning at 6 in the morning until like 9 and blah blah blah. And I was like, perfect. This is the universe is kind of like delivered for me. And I walked into the room and I was just like, oh my god! Like they were like guys in speedos and sweating, and women in their bikinis, and the yoga I was going to before, like people were wearing like jogging pants and stuff. It was like it wasn't like sweaty yoga. It was like inner yoga style or breath centric meditation. But this room, they were doing Ashtanga, the Mysore practice, and it was amazing. And then that's where I started to I became an assistant to my teacher. So I assisted him for maybe like 5 years. From that point, um, the studio manager, they offered me classes as well. So I started to teach. That was perfect. But I didn't really think about, I wasn't really like, oh, I really want to be a teacher. It just kind of happened.
Well, you kind of, I mean, your journey has been almost a slightly more traditional journey in the sense of,
Mm,
you worked with a master of it and became sort of an
mm,
apprentice, and it
mm,
might not have used those words, but that was kind of the journey that was kind of coming because you were studying and working with someone, and then eventually
mm,
you're sort of handed the baton to, become the master and teacher yourself.
mm,
What has what has the body work of yoga, what is the greatest thing you feel it's done for you in terms of maybe internal healing or physical healing? What do you feel like yoga has given you in sort of, we're constantly on this journey of sort of grief and healing in our lives. What do you feel yoga has
mm.
contributed to you the most, whatever that
Yeah.
is?
I think what yoga has done for me, it's really, it's opened my eyes to the spiritual world. I think the more I practice, the more open to the unknown, to the spiritual unknown, to getting away from the physical world. It's not everything. Is not the physical world is one world. Yeah, this is like you can touch and feel stuff, but there is this whole universe, dimensions that you start to explore from doing yoga. Strange things just started happening to me from like, for example, I'll give you a little story. I was living in Africa. I went to live in Africa for a year. I was working there for the UN and United Nations, the UN and UNICEF, and I was taking pictures. I came back to the UK and I was back and I was completely broke, had no money at all. A friend of mine who had a gallery on Brick Lane, she said to me, she offered me like, we've got this space and we've got these artifacts from Africa, and we want to have an exhibition with some photography. We want photography in there. We want to have the artifacts as well. And you've been to Africa now. You have photos, and would you like to have? And I was like, yeah, okay, why not? That evening, I was meditating, and in my meditation, um, I saw myself going around to these different people and organizations and asking them for sponsorship. Yeah. So it was like in my meditation, I could see all of this, and I was like, okay. And then I went to bed, and I also had a dream doing the same thing. That's quite powerful, you know. So the next morning, I went to see all those same people that I had the dream about in the meditation, and I asked them for sponsorship. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. And then all of them said yes, that they would help me and they would sponsor me. And, and I was just like, wow, that's amazing how, if you can really tune in to a certain frequencies and be really clear about what's going on in your space, tune into your dreams, tune into what happens in your meditation, you know, not ignore this stuff, but if you can really pay attention to what's happening, things can happen. It's like there's another world out there telling you stuff. There's the universe is like telling you what to do and guiding you. So for me, yoga has done that for me. It's like it's connected me to a world which is beyond the physical. You know, yeah.
I love that. It's given you like a spiritual belief, a practice. It's kind of opened you
Mm,
up to that space that's just sort of beyond yourself,
mm,
beyond your own skin. Um,
mm.
what do you feel is most important about understanding yogic practice and body movement? Perhaps maybe describe in what way you feel is important to yoga in order to create that opening within yourself.
Having a daily practice, the so. my daily practice of an Ashtanga yoga practice intertwined with a restorative practice, you know, pranayama, you know, doing breathing exercises, like cleansing the body, cleaning the body, sitting still, meditating. I mean, when I was teaching in London, I would try to meditate everywhere. So in my way between classes, I wouldn't let the noise affect me. I would sit on the subway, close my eyes, and that noise would be part of my meditation. So I wouldn't be there going, oh God, this is like noisy. I would just kind of tune into the sound and meditate with that. That's it. And then for years, I've been doing that for, 20 years or so. Like, this is my time to practice every day, and then just do it. So it's using your body. It's using your body to go beyond the body. So as a physical practice, you're using this body. You're twisting. You're turning. You're experiencing yourself in a back bend. You're experiencing yourself twisting, and in a version, you're experiencing yourself in all these different ways. And then at the end, you die. You're in shavasana. So there's a death. You're at the end. You're there on the floor, and you're dead, and you're kind of like you're dead, and you're being reincarnated again. You know, it's like, and you're back to face the world every day, and with this kind of new perception, and you've gone beyond the body, and now come back. It's like, yeah, I've used the body to go beyond it. Now I've come back. Mm-mm. And I used to do these practices actually. This is like earlier on. I wanted to get to remove the fear of death, because somehow there was this fear of death with me, and like for many years, it was like, how this fear of death is stopping me from moving on. So I don't know if I read somewhere or where I saw it, but I decided that I was going to embrace death every night. I was going to face it. And so what I did is I would smoke a whole lot of weed, and I would lie there, either in my bed, and then I would visualize being buried alive in the coffin every single night, because visualizing is the same as being in the coffin. You're experiencing the whole same thing. So we do that and do that and do that. And at first, like, when you smoke, it makes it more intense. Like that fear becomes really, 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 really intense. And so at the beginning, it was like really, really, really hard. And then after a while, I could do it, and there would be no fear. I would just lie there and experience that whole thing, visualize that I'm in the coffin, hear the earth dropping on the coffin, being buried alive. Didn't touch me, didn't bother me. And that fear of death was just like moved aside. It wasn't there anymore. So I could continue with my life, like living, rather than you're going to die anyhow, but there's no point fearing that point, because it's inevitable. We're all going to die. So why fear the inevitable?
That's fucking beautiful.
Thank you for listening in. I hope you'll continue to follow the series And Then He Breathed Free. If you want to check out how to follow Fela or myself, check the notes in the description box to find more details. There's plenty more content and other gentlemen we've interviewed as well, and I look forward to sharing it with you. May you live in